It's just before dawn on a bitter November morning in 1352, and you're crouched beneath the floorboards of a grain storehouse in London. The air is thick with the stench of rotting food, animal droppings, and something worse, something sweet and sickly that clings to the back of your throat. Your knees are soaked through with filth. A ferret writhes impatiently in the leather pouch slung across your chest. And somewhere in the darkness ahead of you, dozens of black rats are watching, their eyes catching the faint glow of your tallow candle like tiny embers. You reach into the pouch, release the ferret into a burrow, and wait. Within seconds, the squealing starts. Rats pour out of holes you didn't even know existed, scrambling over your hands, your arms, your neck. Your terrier lunges. You grab what you can with bare fingers. One bites down hard on the flesh between your thumb and forefinger. You don't flinch. You can't afford to. Welcome to the life of a medieval rat catcher. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't safe, and it certainly wasn't respected. But in a world where rats could destroy an entire winter's food supply or help spread a plague that killed a third of Europe, the rat catcher was one of the most essential workers in any medieval town. Today, we're pulling back the floorboards to look at what this job actually involved. The methods, the dangers, the pay, and the strange folklore that turned these bite-scarred workers into figures of legend. Let's start with why this job existed in the first place. The enemy, the black rat. The black rat had been present in Europe since Roman times. Archaeological evidence shows rat populations grew significantly between the 11th and 13th centuries as trade expanded and towns swelled. These weren't the brown sewer rats most of us picture today. The black rat was a climber. It lived inside your walls. It nested in your roof thatch. It burrowed into the straw you slept on. It gnawed through wooden grain bins and contaminated whatever it touched. In a world without refrigeration or sealed containers, rats were an existential threat. A single infestation could wipe out a family's stored grain, their dried meat, their cheese, everything they needed to survive until the next harvest. Multiply that across a town with open sewers, overflowing middens, and streets lined with butcher's offal, and you had an environment where rats exploded beyond control. And then there were the fleas. We now know that fleas living on black rats carried Yersinia pestis, the bacterium behind the bubonic plague. Medieval people didn't understand this. They blamed bad air, the wrath of God, or minority groups. But they understood that where rats gathered, sickness followed. Someone had to deal with them. Enter the rat catcher. Who became a rat catcher? This wasn't a profession you aspired to. There was no guild, no formal training, no apprenticeship system. Medieval rat catchers were overwhelmingly drawn from the poorest levels of society, people who had no other way to earn a living. They figured they might as well get paid for killing the vermin that already infested their own homes. Most were itinerant workers, wandering from town to town in search of employment. You could recognize them by their distinctive appearance: a box slung over one shoulder, a long pole with dead rats dangling from it like grim trophies, and a dog trotting at their heels. The smell alone would have announced their arrival long before they came into view. Despite their vital role, rat catchers existed on the margins of medieval society. People needed them, but nobody wanted to stand downwind of them or have their daughter marry one. Their work was sporadic, unregulated, and invisible. No town council recorded their names. No church memorial honored their service. The tools and methods of the trade. So how did you actually catch a medieval rat? The methods were simple, brutal, and surprisingly effective. The most basic approach was manual trapping. Rat catchers used crude wooden and metal traps baited with cheese, tallow, or scraps of dried meat. These were placed strategically in cellars, granaries, and along the runs where rats traveled between nests and food sources. A skilled rat catcher could read the signs of rat activity like a hunter reads animal tracks. Gnaw marks on wood, grease smears along walls where oily fur had rubbed repeatedly, and the distinctive musky odor of a large colony. But traps alone weren't enough for a serious infestation. For that, you needed animals. Ferrets were the rat catcher's most valuable weapon. These slender predators could slither into burrows no human hand could reach. The rat catcher would release a ferret into a known entrance, then wait at the exits with nets or bare hands ready to grab the panicking rats as they fled. Managing a working ferret was a genuine skill. You had to carefully regulate its feeding. Too well fed, and it would be sluggish. Too hungry, and it might gorge itself on rats underground and refuse to come back out. Dogs were the other essential partner. Terriers were prized for their ratting ability. A good one could sniff out hidden nests and kill rats with astonishing speed, seizing them by the back and delivering a single lethal shake. The ferret flushed the rats out. The dog dispatched them. Training these animals was the most important investment a rat catcher could make. Then there was poison. Some rat catchers mixed arsenic with bait, toasted cheese, fried liver, oatmeal, or tallow, and placed it near rat runs. But poison was a double-edged weapon. It could kill cats, dogs, livestock, and children who stumbled across it. Poisoned rats often crawled into walls and died in inaccessible places, filling buildings with the stench of decay for weeks. Most experienced rat catchers avoided it, preferring live capture and direct killing. The dangers of the job. If you're thinking this sounds unpleasant, you're dramatically underestimating it. A rat catcher's workplace was the underside of the medieval world. You spent your days crawling beneath warehouse floors, wading through flooded cellars, and feeling your way through pitch-dark spaces where rats had nested for years. You were constantly exposed to animal waste, rotting food, and the accumulated refuse of medieval urban life. And then there were the bites. A cornered rat will fight. Its teeth can pierce leather, and a bite from a large black rat can go clean through to the bone of a finger. Rat catchers were bitten constantly. Every bite carried the risk of infection. In an era before antibiotics, even a minor wound that turned septic could kill you. But the greatest danger was invisible. The fleas that lived on the rats also bit the people who handled them. Rat catchers were in closer contact with potentially plague-carrying animals than anyone else in medieval society. Many died from the very diseases they were helping to combat. The people most essential to controlling the plague were among its most likely victims: pay and social standing. For all these risks, what did a rat catcher actually earn? The honest answer is, not much. Payment varied depending on the severity of the infestation and the wealth of the client. A rat catcher might be paid per rat killed, per day of work, or with a flat fee negotiated with a household or business. Wealthier clients, merchants protecting grain stores, or noble households embarrassed by vermin, might pay handsomely. But for most jobs, the pay was meager, just enough to feed themselves, their animals, and move on to the next town. Some rat catchers found creative ways to supplement their income. The more entrepreneurial ones didn't kill every rat they caught. Live rats had value. They could be sold to breeders or, in later centuries, to the operators of rat-baiting pits where dogs were set against caged rats as a betting spectacle. And there are persistent reports that some rat catchers actually bred rats in secret, releasing them into buildings so they could be paid to remove them. The medieval equivalent of a protection racket. The folklore and the legend. The rat catcher's strange position in medieval society, necessary but despised, skilled but unrecognized, made them natural subjects for folklore. People whispered that certain rat catchers possessed supernatural abilities, charming rats with secret words, controlling them through spells, or luring them to their deaths with enchanted music. In a world that believed in witchcraft and the power of the devil, a man with uncanny power over vermin was both useful and deeply unsettling. No story captures this tension better than the legend of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. The tale, rooted in an event that appears to have actually occurred on June 26, 1284, tells of a colorfully dressed piper who rid the German town of Hamelin of its rats through enchanted music. When the townspeople refused to pay him the agreed-upon 1,000 guilders, the piper returned and used his pipe to lure away 130 of the town's children, who were never seen again. What's remarkable is the historical evidence. A stained glass window depicting the piper and children was installed in Hamelin's church around 1300, just 16 years after the supposed event. A town record from 1384 states it had been 100 years since the children left. An inscription on the Rattenfänger house reads that in 1284, 130 children were led away by a piper in multicolored clothing and lost near the Koppen Hills. Historians have proposed numerous explanations: that the children were victims of a plague epidemic, or young settlers recruited by agents called locators, brightly dressed men who traveled through Germany recruiting colonists for new settlements in Eastern Europe. The connection to rats wasn't even added to the story until roughly 1559, nearly 300 years after the original event. But the legend endures because it crystallizes something real about how medieval people viewed the rat catcher, as a figure who moved between the human world and something darker, who possessed knowledge that ordinary people didn't understand, and who demanded fair payment for work that civilized society preferred not to think about. After the Black Death, a changed profession. The Black Death, which devastated Europe between 1347 and 1353, killed an estimated 30 to 60% of the continent's population. In its aftermath, attitudes toward rat catchers began to shift. Communities that had once ignored the rat catcher's work now recognized it as something closer to a public service. The connection between pest control and disease prevention, though not scientifically understood, became harder to deny when the evidence was piled in mass graves across the continent. This recognition was painfully slow to translate into better pay or social acceptance. Rat catchers continued to operate without official support for centuries. But the groundwork was laid in those plague years, when the humble, scarred, flea-bitten rat catcher became something more than a nuisance worker, something closer to a guardian of public health. Why any of this matters? The medieval rat catcher represents something we often overlook in history. We remember the kings and the knights, the bishops and the builders. We rarely remember the people who did the work nobody else would do. These were workers who crawled through filth so others could eat clean grain, who handled disease-carrying animals with bare hands so families could sleep without rats in their food stores, who wandered from town to town with ferrets and dogs and scarred fingers, offering a service everyone needed and nobody respected. We know them only through the complaints of towns they served, the legends that grew around them, and the archaeological evidence of the rats they spent their lives fighting. But every time a medieval family opened their grain bin and found it untouched, every time a town went one more season without plague, somewhere in the background, a rat catcher had done their work. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the medieval world's most overlooked professions, hit that like button and subscribe to The Medieval Worker. What medieval job do you want us to cover next? Let me know in the comments. And, as always, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.